You can start now.
Hi, this is MS Raju. I'm speaking from Visakhapatnam in India. Today, my good fortune that I would introduce two illustrious speakers. One is Sam Taraporevala. In fact, I've known him from quite a long time. When he started his XRCVC, 1 year later, we started Vision Aid. So he is 17 years old and I'm 16. We are teenagers. So in fact, Sam is an institution. It's very difficult for me to read a mundane introduction. I'll just put my own way. He has been a professor of his own merit in Xavier and in anthropology and sociology. And later on, his love began for XRCVC. Here, he has not only founded it, but he's nurtured it. Today, anybody can see the website of that, and they'll find out what type of work he has been doing and what he's doing it. I knew him earlier in 2005. So I went to him to get one of my devices called camera mouse approved by, rather endorsed by him, and they helped me a lot. And that piece of that device sold very well, and it has been for a long time. It was a magnifier excellence in India for electronic operation. Later on, I've known him due to the association we had commonly with Site Savers India. So, in fact, though we were working in different places, our objectives were same. And in items like inclusion, you have to mention Sam's name first. In fact, he has written a book called I for Inclusion. The title is very misleading. You would think it is some pamphlet. No, it is an extraordinary book which I will recommend to anybody who wants to educate the vision impaired people. And he has been in so many panels of the government and in consultation. It's very difficult for us to put them in a regular order. But I'll mention this. If Government of India wants to start anything that helps, that will help the disabled people, they will consult him first. He has actually been in the committee for various things like that, and including the most important one, forming the 12th five-year plan of India. There are very crucial decisions to be taken there, and he has been using his talent and experience. When it comes to inclusion, when it comes to accessibility, or when it comes to enablement, Sam is the last word I can say. In fact, he has done so much of this work and with such a devotion that I congratulate him on doing so well. And today he will give his very valuable insights, and I will leave it at that, because it is very difficult for me to put any more glorious words for what he is doing, which is in fact much better. Now comes to Mr. Krishna Warrier. In fact, he is known as a journalist earlier. Then he took to this vision enablement, and he joined XRCVC, and he helped Sam, and he in fact even helping him even now. And then his forte is communication, and not only ordinary communication, the effective communication, and that's what he does teach to people in his purview. Even he has done a lot of work in this one, and he has been associated with very big institutions, educational as well as you can say vision enablement. He is connected with places like IITB Monash project. people, I don't know whether you have heard the name of the Monash project. It is a small place in Victoria, Australia, but it is an absolute place of excellence. In fact, they are on the top 100 people in the when it comes to technology, and they'll do basic things like water, clean power, and things like that. And I'm very glad that he is with us today, and he will give some insights of what's going on. I'll give a small story about Monash and close the case. Monash is not an ordinary institution. Here is a institution where they go for the research, not for research sake, but research for results. They tell the story that a father of a Monash scholar went to see his son working in his laboratory and asked him, "My dear son, what are you doing?" In fact, the son said, "We are trying to find a universal solvent." He said, "Wonderful, but when we find it, where will we keep it?" You see, this is how my method works. For example, unless the end purpose. So Monash is known for extraordinary insights into ultimate use of technology, and they will not do technology for technology. So I'm very glad that Krishna is associated with them, and he will bring some more insights to that. I have not done in a regular introduction of speakers. Mine is very irregular and freelancing. I'm sorry if I miss any point, but your quality is known to everybody. So neither Sam nor Krishna actually require any introduction. So thank you very much. I will end my bhashan.
Thank you. Great introduction. Sam and Krishna, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mr. Raju, and thanks, Ram, and thanks to Vision8 for having us over. The theme we are going to be focusing on is essentially connected to the advocacy work we have done and the awareness connected to it. So we're going to run you through a few slides. In the interest of accessibility, we are going to follow a simple principle that a slide would be read out. Typically in a presentation, one does not read out a slide, but given the fact that Zoom is not fully accessible, we are going to be using the principle of reading out a slide so that if we have any visually challenged attendees, they would not be placed at a disadvantage. Just want to have a quick mic check from my side and Krishna's side. Are we audible? Krishna, can you just say hi?
Yes, hello, namaste, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're located in. I hope you can hear me, and I hope you can see the slide as well.
Yes, we can see the slides and hear you loud and clear.
So let's get cracking then. So I will just move on to the second slide, which gives you a quick overview of what we are going to be touching upon. So Krishna, can we just run through that?
Just a minute. Yes, so the first slide was just the title slide, which contained the name of the presentation and the name of the presenters, which you already know. Slide number 2 starts with the word outline, and then it has bullet points. I'm just going to read out the bullet points to you very quickly. Bullet point number 1, the concept of advocacy. Awareness is a vital prerequisite. Bullet point number 2, the rationale. Number 3, who is responsible? Number 4, the method, some basic principles. Number 5, nature of advocacy. Number 6, the XRCVC experience, some examples. Number 7, key challenges along the way. And we'll finally end with concluding remarks.
Thanks. So just something about the advocacy work of the XRCVC, I'd like to just place it in context. The XRCVC, as Mr. Raju mentioned, started in 2003. It started as a very small support unit on the St. Xavier's College Mumbai campus for blind students. We wanted an accessible computer, that's about all. But as we grew within the first year and a half, we realized that even though we may have the best of technology on campus, as our students were passing through the educational system and they would get into the wider social milieu, they were going to face a series of challenges. The least of them being blindness. Frankly, there were a whole lot of others, largely to do with blocked mindsets, faulty rules, and so on. And that's when we grappled with one simple question: can we make a difference? I'll just start off with how we got into advocacy and then touch upon some of the other work later. But I'll give you a simple example. We all know about the OCR system, that's optical character recognition and scanning of a book. And at Xavier's, we had a very good scanner. I'm talking about 2004 or an early 2005. The scanner was good, brilliant for that time. We had a good PC. At that time, we never talked about GBs, we talked about MBs, as people know. And one of our students who was majoring in economics at the third year came up to us and said, look, I need a soft copy of this book. So we said, brilliant, the technology exists, scan it. It was around 800-page book, and a book on Indian economics, replete with tables, and more tables. Statistics is something which the Indian economist always plays with. So when we asked him to scan the book, he said, look, it's impossible because tables will go out of alignment, and how do I do X, Y, or Z? Can we not contact the publisher and ask him for a soft copy? This was way back in 2005. And when we said, okay, which meant that we were not just going to be using our in-house facility, we had to step out into the society. Till then, very honestly, I knew nothing of advocacy, and I don't claim, as Mr. Raju may say whatever he wants, I'm not an expert. We are all learning along the way. So we called up this publisher and requested him for a soft copy of the title. You know, given the fact that most of you are working in this field, there is this whole idea, oh, blindness means, you know, you're doing very noble work. None of us are doing noble work. We're all doing some work. But if you say I'm working for the blind, you suddenly acquire the aura of being very, very noble and charitable, which I don't think is the case. But anyway, so this publisher said, oh, you're doing very noble work. I will certainly help you. And I was joyous. I said, wow, my first call is going to hit gold, bullseye. But then he bowled his masterstroke. He said, I'll certainly even give you a complimentary copy. I said, don't worry, sir, I can pay for it. He says, no, I'll give you a complimentary hard copy. I said, look, I have a hard copy with me. We don't want to scan the book. We want a soft copy. He says, no, it will mean violation of copyright. And that's when we hit a roadblock. And to cut a long story short, I phoned him a number of times and he frankly refused to even take my calls. Then I finally called him from a number he didn't recognize. And he took my call, and in order to put me off, he said, don't worry, you want the soft copy book? I'll give it to you if you get me a letter from the education minister. I put the phone down on him, frankly. And that's when I resolved that we don't need letters from the education minister, we need a law. And that's when we started our first active work on advocacy in terms of changing the copyright law, which I'll touch upon later. The reason why I've given this background to you is then we realized that advocacy is something which goes hand in hand with anybody working in the social sector. And that's when we came up with our understanding of what advocacy is. And let Krishna just run us through that simple definition. I don't want you all to memorize it or anything, but that's the framework we have worked with.
Yeah, so I just moved on to the next slide, which is the title of that slide is the concept and rationale. And there's a definition of advocacy, which I'm going to read out to you. It says, it is the planned and systematic influencing of individuals, organizations, and governments, thoughts, attitudes, behaviors, policies, systems, programs, and laws by persons and organizations representing a particular social issue.
So if you see, this is a pretty wide understanding of the term. It's influencing people. And I see this as something like selling ideas. If you want to change something, you have to convince the other party who either is mentally blocked, has myths, or has anything, or just the laws don't exist. And you need a paradigm shift. Sometimes it has to be a very active shake-up. At other times, it would be bit by bit change. But the idea is we need to change. And who is influenced? It could be an individual, it could be an organization, it could be an entire country. And very honestly, anybody who's working in the field of social advocacy would agree with me that it's an uphill task. Oftentimes you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes you take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But one has to keep pegging away. But the point that we want to make here is that advocacy is a very broad, very comprehensive approach at bringing about change. So let's move on to the next focus.
Yes. In the next slide, the title of that slide is Essential Ingredients of Advocacy. And here what we'd like to speak about is 4 points again. Point number 1 being awareness of rights. 2, awareness of self. 3, spreading awareness within various stakeholders, including the community, and effective action. And this is really where we would like to marry advocacy with awareness, because as Sam will tell you, and I will probably be able to add a little later, our awareness work goes hand in hand with our advocacy.
Yes, Krishna. So it's like 2 sides of the same coin. If you have to change a mindset, you have to create light, not heat. You need to, and that light is spread through awareness. Oftentimes, we found in our work that people don't want to exclude, but they've never ever given a thought to something. Why? Because they've not been exposed to it. So when we conduct our awareness programs, oftentimes, and we ask some of our participants, have you come in contact with a person with blindness or low vision? And oftentimes they haven't. So their notions about blindness or low vision are based on a whole range of social conditioning, which is replete with myths, replete with notions about either the fact that they're too dumb or they have so-called 6 senses and so on and so forth. So the focus is on generating awareness. And once that awareness comes in, you need social action, whether it is a change in laws, whether it is adopting multiple other strategies. So that's the basic rationale and approach that we adopt. And Krishna, if you would like to add anything here.
Yeah, so we spoke about awareness of rights, awareness of self, effective action. But point number 3 on that slide, which says spreading awareness within various stakeholders, including the community, to me is one of the most important things that we need to do. And that is something that we will touch upon in greater detail when we speak about our flagship awareness program, which is known as Antarchakshu. Some of you already know about this program, but for those who don't, we'll speak about it in detail and we'll share some insights about how Antarchakshu actually came about and what it has tried to achieve and how far it has succeeded in achieving what it has tried to achieve. Sam, we'll go on to the next slide and
just
then
before
we'll...
that, Krishna, 1 second. When we say about awareness of self, and this is very, very important because I believe very strongly in this whole notion that there's nothing about us without us. And in order that the blind themselves are able to propel this engine of change, people have to be conscious about themselves, their strengths, their limitations. You can't paint everybody in one brush, but people need to understand themselves and how things can work. Yeah, Krishna, go ahead.
I'll move to the next slide, which the title of that slide says the rationale for obviously advocacy and awareness. And there are 2 bullet points in that slide. Number 1, the human rights case. Number 2, the need to sensitize.
Here again, remember, we've moved far beyond the time where, blindness was considered as, a curse, for instance. It's now moving into a very active human rights discourse. You have legal provisions, whether it's to do with United Nations conventions, or in India, you have the Rights of Persons with Disability Act. In other countries, you have their various laws. So there is a very strong human rights base, but these laws can do nothing, absolutely nothing, if it's not also driven by a certain social consciousness. You can have lots of laws, but they don't matter if you don't have effective implementation. So you need to champion that change as well. And that's the rationale that we are focusing on. Look at it as a composite package, not as something in isolation.
I'll move on to the next slide. The title of that slide reads, Who is Responsible? And here we'd like to discuss 2 types of advocacy, the informal type of advocacy and then the formal type of advocacy.
So we are all making this whole process of change happen, hopefully, informal and formal. What do we mean by this? The formal is the whole engagement with the system, whether we draft a representation and then follow it up with a type of lobbies or whatever. But more often than not, what really matters is the informal advocacy as well. And in fact, the members of our center that we work with, one of the first things we tell them is become a self-advocate. Because we can't be everywhere. And getting people to empower themselves, to represent themselves, to articulate themselves is very important. A simple example. Let's say I go for a job interview and on the panel, I have somebody who says, hey, you're blind, how can you work? And if I take out my laptop and tell them, look, here I have a screen reader. This is how I navigate my computer, and this is how I communicate. I'm on par with anybody else. I'm using the informal approach, but it's as important because we can't only adopt the top-down approach, which comes through the legal and other routes. The top-down approach has to meet the down-up approach. And it's only then that both are going to succeed. Otherwise, you're going to have a very topsy-turvy scenario. And that's very, very important. Formal and informal go together. And anybody who wants to work on advocacy needs to empower as many people as possible to become self-advocates.
You know, Sam, I remember when you spoke about formal and informal, there was a particular awareness event that we were conducting in the college where it was targeted at people from the education sector and from educational institutions and policymakers over there. And I remember you suggested I should go and invite a very top education official from the state government of Maharashtra. And just before I was going, you suggested, why don't you take one of our bright students along, one of our visually impaired students from the center along. And I remember taking this boy along who is very, very articulate, but who had never gone on such a, if I may use the word, mission before. The fact that he came along with me, the fact that he spoke, and the fact that he invited that official actually opened up so many doors, because it was not this lady alone, this official alone who came, but she came with an entire retinue of people
Entire
who worked.
team. Yes.
Entire team of people who worked with her. And I think that's where the informal approach has to marry the formal approach, because that's only where you get the results that you hopefully get the results that you desire. We'll move on to the next slide, which is the methods. And this, we've divided into a few different sections. Section 1 is awareness, and awareness is further subdivided into A, individual one-to-one, B, organizational, specific authorities and personnel, and C, public awareness through simulation approaches.
So awareness is the key to advocacy, because nobody's going to change unless they are convinced. And in order to convince people, they have to know. And this happens, as Krishna mentioned right now through the slide, right from the individual level to a collective. But what is very, very, very critical in this awareness strategy is experience. Now, a word of caution when we use a simulation approach, for example, with blindness, it is not necessary that simulation will bring about a positive change. It can backfire if not handled effectively. And when we talk about Antarchakshu later also, we will be mentioning this, but just a word of caution, simulation is a very powerful, potent tool, but it has to be handled with care. It's like saying a surgeon's knife is brilliant. You can heal, but you can also kill. And if you don't want it to backfire, the simulation has to be handled with care as well.
Yes, so I'll move on to the next slide. Under methods, we just finished with awareness. The next method that we'd like to discuss is the legal course. And under legal course, we again have 3 subsections. Subsection A is public interest litigation, PIL. Subsection B is lobbying for legislative change to make existing legal frameworks inclusive, eliminate the discriminatory ones, and ensure effective implementation of already existing laws. And subsection C is policy formulation and modification through addressing policymakers, lawmakers, public officials, and community service providers.
So in terms of the legal approach, whether you go to court and fight a case, demanding implementation of a law, that's possible. Public interest litigation, if things are, I don't know what you call them in the US or in other countries. In India, we call it a PIL, or somebody takes the authorities to court saying that this is not being enforced, please do it. It's in the public interest. Or getting, as we did the Parliament of India to change the copyright law of India, or getting the banking establishment to bring in effective rules. These are all legal backbones, and they are very, very critical. So awareness on the one side and the legal approach on the other. So when we say legal, we are not just talking about the laws of the land. We could talk about a policy in a company, where a company makes a clear-cut policy that they are, let's say, equal opportunity employers. So by legal, we are even including that. So for example, at St. Xavier's College, we made a very conscious choice that we want to be an inclusive campus. And so our website makes a clear-cut statement that we are an inclusive campus, and for special student needs, accommodations are available, and this is how they will be provided. So legally, we are not just talking about laws of the land, but we are talking about institutional frameworks and policies as well. Yeah, let's move on.
Sam, while on legal, would you briefly like to touch upon our experience with one of our members who wanted to pursue physiotherapy?
Yeah, so that will come later, but I'll just touch upon this. We had to go to court. The XRCVC didn't directly go to court, but we backed a student who had studied her 12th grade with science. And in fact, she was the student who we actually had study 11th and 12th science because prior to that, the Maharashtra state law board did not have provisions for science education. But I'll come up, touch upon that later. But she finished the 12th grade with science, and she wanted to become a physiotherapist. In the US, I think you call them physical therapist. And very clearly, she had to give an entrance exam, but she was not allowed to give the entrance exam by law, because if you go to the website at that time, it clearly said a blind student is not eligible to sit for this exam. This obviously was in contradiction with the laws of the land in India. And we had to fight a very active legal challenge to the whole system. So much so that it took, we got a stay order on this. The government immediately allowed her to sit for the exam. And long story short, today she's practicing after graduating some years ago as a private physiotherapist. But the job had to be facilitated through active legal recourse, and side by side with that, even the cited physiotherapists initially were very opposed to the idea. So
Sam, there seems to be a bit of problem with your audio.
Yes, I'm not able to hear Sam. Krishna, I can hear you loud and clear, but Sam suddenly cut off. I don't know.
I know, yeah, there seems to be some problem, but we'll just give it half a minute and see whether he's able to come back.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to log in again. So let's just give it half a minute.
Sure. Sure. If you want, in the meantime, just continue talking about the subject. Feel free.
Yes. So, Sam was talking about the case about the physiotherapy, the girl, the student who wanted to do physiotherapy. And we had to take the legal route. We had to go to court. XRCVC did not personally go to court, but we backed the student all the way. When I say back the student, here was a young girl who had never known what it was to take a legal route. So first of all, counseling her parents, getting all of them together to agree, getting a lawyer who would be able to argue her case. And the really nice thing that happened was that, as I've been saying earlier as well, marrying advocacy along with an awareness along with advocacy. At one of our awareness events after the judgment was passed, we had the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court coming over to experience the entire simulation. So that's where we found that, advocacy and awareness go very, very much hand in hand. I'll move on to the next slide, and hopefully Sam will connect with us whenever he's able to. The next slide is about the basic principles of advocacy. And here we just like to mention a few points. The bullet points in this slide of basic principles are: keep it simple, use laws wherever possible, the importance of networking, use of representations, start with the basics, importance of success cases and practical examples, and the importance of follow-up. I don't think these need much of explanation by way of explanation, but I'll just quickly give you our own example. One of the things that Sam, and I've been working with Sam and with XRCVC for close to 10
Am I audible?
years. Yes, Sam, go ahead.
Krishna, am I audible now?
Yes, Sam, you're audible as well as visible. And I had continued from what you were speaking about the physiotherapy student. We moved on to the next slide, which was basic principles. And under that, I just read out the points, which were keep it simple, use laws wherever possible, importance of networking, use of representations, start with the basics, importance of success cases and practical examples, and importance of follow-up.
Krishna, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Krishna, you may want to call Sam on the cell phone and tell him that he is audible. Maybe he has to turn on his speaker.
Yes, I think there is somebody to assist him,
Okay.
but I'll try to do that.
Yeah.
Just give me a minute.
Sure. And while Sam and Krishna come back, I'll just fill in, provide a small filler here.
Krishna, am I audible?
Yes, Sam, we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Sam, we can hear you. Raju, sorry, Ram, you can go ahead with your filler. I'll try and get Sam on the line.
No, I was just saying Visionade and XRCVC.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, Sam, you are.
Okay. I don't know, there was a downtime.
Okay, go ahead, Sam.
We filled it up. I was chatting with them a little bit more about the student.
I don't know where I lost everybody.
Okay, I don't know if we lost Sam again.
We seem to have lost him again. So anyway, I'll take this forward. We were talking about the basic principles, which are pretty simple to understand. Like when you're talking about advocacy and awareness, unless you keep it very, very simple, the technicalities can come in later. Sam, are you with us?
Could I
Okay.
log in, Ram? Can you hear me?
Yes, Sam. Sam, we can hear you, but the quality is not good. I mean, you're kind of...
981013546. 3546.
Hello. Yes.
Can you ask him to use a headphone?
I think so, to unmute, okay, because this is going on. Then
So Sam is actually trying to log in through his sister's phone, and once he logs in, we'll have to unmute.
Sure.
The
What?
name that will appear is Farida Taraporevala.
Okay. I will look out for that and make her co-host as soon as she joins.
Yeah, she should be coming in any moment.
Of course.
I think she's in, so you can unmute.
Yes, I'm actually going to make Farida Taraporevala a co-host, and she can unmute. Okay, now here Sam has to turn off his main phone.
yeah.
I'll do that. I'll tell him.
Am I audible now?
Yes, Sam, go ahead. Yes.
So I
Sam,
was speaking about
if you could just place the phone, we can see only your chin and your neck.
1 second.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
just
better. That's fine. That's fine now. Yes, that's
okay.
fine.
Okay, so you're doing some firefighting right now.
No.
Am I okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, all good. Please
So
go
I
ahead.
think I don't know where y'all the connection decided to snap. I was talking about the physiotherapy case and the fact that we had to fight a long legal battle. But today, the student who graduated is a full-fledged qualified private physiotherapist. So anyway, Krishna, we can move on.
Yeah. I moved on to the next slide, which was the basic principles, and I had read out those principles. I'll read them out quickly again. Keep it simple, use laws wherever possible, importance of networking, use of representation, start with the basics, importance of success cases and practical examples, and importance of follow-up.
So these are all self-explanatory points, but the first one is very, very important. Don't make it high-flown. If one has to make a difference, we have to touch people at the emotional level. That is to say, touch them at the heart. Make them realize that you're dealing with another human being. I'm not talking about sympathy. I'm talking about empathy. And if you keep it simple, it's going to work, right? So Krishna, let's move on.
The nature of and under nature of advocacy, again, we'd like to speak about things that are pretty simple to understand. One is advocacy is primarily a human intensive process, as Sam said, emotion, empathy, not sympathy. And the advocacy team needs to imbibe key effective characteristics, which are resilience, patience, persistence, proactiveness, and quick response time.
It's not a 9-to-5 job, let me tell you that. And if you're taking on somebody to play the advocacy role, they have to imbibe the spirit in their DNA virtually. If you don't need mental genius, you need commitment. And that's where resilience is very critical. You're going to have downtime, you're going to have problems, you're going to have people putting you off. If somebody is the type who gets easily disheartened, then God help you. You're never going to survive a day in advocacy. Because yes, we have results, but we also have failures. And oftentimes, unless we have a tough inside, it's not going to make a difference. And we can only be tough inside if we're really convinced about what we want to do. If it's a 9-to-5 paid job, it's not going to work, very honestly.
So I joined Sam a few years after. I joined Sam a few years after he had established XRCVC, and one of the first things he told me is that though persistence starts with a P, actually the P in persistence actually stands for pester power. Sam, maybe you'd like to talk about that when we get in a little later. So pestering people till they're willing to listen to you. We'll talk about that a little later.
Be a child. You know, you would have seen how a child can harass till they get what they want. I want this chocolate. And in advocacy, it's all about that. If we want that carrot, we have to go for it and shake heaven and earth till we get it.
We'll now come to the XRCVC experience with some examples, and we'd like to briefly touch upon 4 different things. Again, subsections. Subsection number 1 is financial access and what we did and the journey that we had, advocacy and awareness journey to get financial access. The second is print access. The third is education access. And the fourth is Antarchakshu, which is our flagship awareness program. Antarchakshu is a Sanskrit word, and Sam will tell you more about it. And we'd really like to wind up this particular section with how awareness generation through Antarchakshu helped boost our work.
So let's move on to the first of our advocacy focus areas, which is the next slide on financial access.
Financial access, yes. And under financial access, I again have 4 bullet points, and I have an image on this slide. The bullet points are accessible ATMs, 2, DMAT rules and NSDL, 3, the Reserve Bank of India circular, and 4, the Indian Banks Association guidelines. And the image that we have on the slide is an accessible ATM being tested at Delhi airport.
So let's pick up this whole thing. For those who are not in India, NSDL, that's the second point on the slide, National Security Depository Limited. All of these rules, this was to do with shares. If I wanted to get into the stock exchange, I had to buy shares, and I was not allowed the opening of a depository account simply because I was blind. Similarly, the RBI did not. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Similarly, the central bank in India, which is called the Reserve Bank, did not allow a blind person to open a single name bank account simply because they were blind. They were not allowed to use an ATM. They were not allowed a whole range of things. And our first success came very early, and I would think that gave us the impetus to keep going with the National Security Depository Limited calling us in. The managing director then was very open-minded. He said, send me a representation. And I'll talk about the strategy later, but again, one of the common things we use is network support. So we got almost 20 plus organizations to write in letters of support saying that this change is needed. Because if I go alone, who do I represent? Whose voice am I speaking for? Whereas if we bring in a network of organizations, they carry weight. And within 2 weeks of giving the representation, NSDL changed the rule. So that was our first success. Then came the Reserve Bank, and they had a similar horrid rule. Banks were not allowed, were constantly refusing account opening to blind users. And we had to meet with the authorities in the RBI, the deputy governor of RBI, Ms. Usha Thorat at that time. She even came in for one of our awareness events. And she was so convinced that she immediately ordered virtually her team. She fired them. Which century are we living in? Are we living in 1700? Are we living in 1800? Or are we living in 2000 and odd? And we got the law changed. Again, thanks to the awareness program, which we call Antarchakshu, which Krishna will touch upon later. Antarchakshu is Sanskrit for the inner eye, where we simulate blindness and people get into a blindfold condition. So we say you have an eye-opening experience with your eyes shut. And then we again lobbied, a lot of lobbying goes in, and then we got the ATM rules in place. Today we have over 30,000 accessible ATMs in India. And thanks to the Reserve Bank for at least being open-minded. Let's move on to the next advocacy initiative, Krishna.
Yes, so we have print and education access, and then Antarchakshu, Sam. So maybe in the interest of time, we could just move through the print and financial a little faster.
Yeah, so the print was the copyright law. I told you the background about the copyright law. We had to I don't know how many visits one had to make to Delhi. I don't have a count. Almost every month I was in Delhi once or twice, lobbying with various people. And finally, we got the Parliament of India to change the law. And the interesting thing about this is that once the law changed, India became a champion even at the WIPO, that's World Intellectual Property Authority in Geneva. And we, in fact, had the Marrakesh Treaty, which is a global treaty on book sharing happening. And side by side with that, we worked with Bookshare some of you in the US would be familiar with it, world's largest online library. Bookshare came into India initially with the XRCVC and 2 other organizations constantly engaging with them and convincing them, because they were scared first to come to India. And then we had the setup of an accessible library in India. So that's a print access journey. Moving on to the next slide, which is Krishna, to do with education, if you want to quickly read through that.
Yeah, I'll read through the, I had not read through the print access. There are just 3 points, so I'll read that as well. Print access had 3 points: Copyright Act 1957, which Sam spoke about, the publisher contact, talking to a lot of publishers, and last point, there was the Bookshare and inclusive library models, including Sugamya Pustakalaya, which is the inclusive online library service. Educational access again has 4 points. One is Maharashtra State Board of Secondary and Higher Secondary Education Circular on Science Education. 2 is University of Mumbai Psychology. 3 is Physiotherapy, the Mainstream Challenge. And 4 is Scribe Guidelines.
So summarizing those, till about 10 years ago, if a blind student wished to study science in India, you didn't have rules. The Central Board of Secondary Education or Maharashtra State Board did not have rules in place. And we had to lobby with both authorities. Thanks to say that the moment we spoke with them, they agreed within no time. In terms of physiotherapy, the battle was much more hard fought, but it took more time. Even at to study psychology, for instance, in Mumbai University, if one wanted to major in the subject, it was not allowed because practical exams were there. Again, lobbying, it worked. So the other challenge was, scribe guidelines. How does a blind person give an exam? And again, that was a tough task. Lobbying and networking with various organizations. We had rules in place. Today, that has been challenged again, and the work has restarted. So anyway, let's move on to other areas.
Yeah, the final that we'd like to talk about, our sensitization program, Antarchakshu.
Krishna, there's some audio feedback.
Yeah, Sam, if you can.
Yeah, Sam.
Need me to mute?
Yeah.
Maybe Ram can mute Sam for a while.
Yeah, I think that's no. It's better Sam mutes and unmutes himself. So when you're not talking, just mute yourself, Sam, because we're getting some feedback.
Yeah, so I was talking about Antarchakshu, which is our feedback, XRCVC's feedback. XRCVC's flagship sensitization program. And from the year 2006, when Antarchakshu was launched, XRCVC has reached out to over 37,000 people through these awareness programs, which we've conducted all over India. And last year, we also had an opportunity to conduct it outside India. Now, the variants of Antarchakshu, it started as a mega event where we would get about 1,000 people coming into a particular location, and we'd run this event for maybe 2 days or 3 days. Then we moved on to another approach, which is the sit-down approach. Then we had the customized approach. And finally, since the lockdown has started and since the pandemic has started, Antarchakshu has actually gone online. So we also have an online version of Antarchakshu. Sam, if you'd like to unmute and just speak a little bit about these. We have 4 images in the next slide. I'll quickly describe what those images are. The first image is of the traditional mega event, which was conducted at the St. Xavier's Hall, where, like I said, we had about 800 to 1,000 participants coming in per day. The second picture, the second image is of the sit-down approach, where we have about 30 to 40 participants. Is the customized approach.
Yes, Sam needs
I'll tell you when to unmute, Sam. And the third image that we have on that slide is the customized approach, where we actually target Antarchakshu at customized groups. The picture that you can see on this particular slide is where we had gone to an eye hospital and conducted Antarchakshu for the staff of the eye hospital. And the fourth one, the fourth image is that of Antarchakshu, which we have been conducting online during the lockdown. This was an event that I had conducted just the day before yesterday with a bunch of media students in a very popular Mumbai college called Sophia College for Women. Yes, Sam, you can unmute and go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
So Antarchakshu started as a concept way back in 2006, when our own college students who were blind said, you know, most of our own classmates don't know things about us. How do we create awareness? And if you have to deal with students, they said we need to do it in a fun way. And that's the first time they created the idea. It's not my idea or anybody's. It's student driven in terms of evolving the concept. And today it's become something which has been taken at major places. As I said, the RBI Reserve Bank Deputy Governor went through this. We've had major publishers going through it. We've had educationists going through this. So it's making a lot of difference in terms of going through the simulation condition, whether it's in a sit-down way or a walk-through way, where people come in, obviously they come in with preconceived ideas, they get themselves blindfolded, they go through certain designed activities, and when they are out of their blindfolds, we have a very structured debriefing session. Because as I said at the beginning, we don't want people going away with new myths. And that's very, very, very critical. So in the interest of time, I'm not getting into the details of Antarchakshu, but it's been one of our very active strategies to create awareness. Yeah, Krishna, go ahead.
Yeah.
Are you getting a lot of feedback sound still, or can I keep the mic on?
No, yeah, you can keep the mic on.
I think it's the heavy rain which is falling outside which created the clatter. I've just shut the door.
You can keep the mic on. I think we're at the last or the last couple of slides. This is about key challenges along the way. And again, we have a few bullet points that I'm going to read out to you. Bullet point number 1, the more macro the issue, the more diffused the results. 2, bureaucratic roadblocks, including transfers of officials in government. 3, unimplemented rules. 4, ongoing funding. 5, timing of legal redressal is key, and the process can backfire if it is not timed properly. And the 5th one here is often in the end, it is a one moment that decides, and to that extent, the out of control nature of the situation can overwhelm a lot of people in this particular domain.
So I just summarize the key thoughts here. One of the most important things is when we want some change, we need to be very clear about what change we want. If you say things very vaguely, you're going to get vague results. So pinpoint what changes are desired. That's very, very critical. Also, when you get into social advocacy, it's important to pick up low-hanging fruits. So even when you have a very tough person to interact with across the table, get them to start giving you low-hanging fruits. They will realize that by doing that, they are feeling good, but they are also realizing that things are not so bad, won't go out of hand. In terms of our challenges, very honestly, we've had to think on our feet sometimes. And a social advocate would have to think on their feet. It's the last minute decides whether you made the right decision. Funding for social advocacy is always difficult to come by because results don't come overnight. Funder wants to see how many people have received X, Y, or Z. You know, this is our biggest problem at the center. where do we get the funds from for advocacy initiatives, which are so critical? Everybody wants numbers. And even though we've got concrete results in advocacy, we can never promise it. How can I promise that this change will come within 2 months or 3 months or 4 months or 1 year? And that's where funding is the toughest thing. And today with COVID, funding is going to become even a tougher issue for the social sector. And I only hope that we don't have to go slow on some of our initiatives because of that. And that's an active push we have to give in terms of keeping the revenue stream for the center alive. Yeah, Krishna, let's move on. Hello?
Yes, Krishna?
I think, have you lost Krishna now?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so I'll just wrap up in any case, because there are a few other challenges that we have faced in terms of doing our work, which has been to do with networking. Oftentimes, larger organizations feel threatened when a small organization works. And one of the biggest challenges has been keeping that collective going. Whenever you want to do advocacy, you need a collective, and you have to bring everybody on board. Otherwise, if you are going to talk in different voices or pull in opposite directions, the initiative is going to fail, right? So this is a key point to keep in mind when we are working on advocacy. I'll pause at this. Krishna has come back.
Yes, Krishna came back and he's showing the slides. So.
Yeah.
But I'm not able to hear him.
Sorry, I was thrown out and I managed to find my way back in. As they said, pester power is the only way to get back. So one has to push the door open and come back. So here I am. But I think, Sam, I
ran them through everything else. So yeah. We could open it up for questions.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute participants so that they can kind of ask questions if they have any. I'll ask the first question, Sam and Krishna. First of all, that was a fabulous talk, a lot of experience, depth of experience, very impressive results. And also you're working at all the levels, national, state, local, organizational. So really a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience. Thank you for the amazing talk. Looking out at the next 5 years, how can organizations and NGOs like Vision8 join in this work? I mean, what do you see as the areas which are important and where we can get involved to support and expand the work you are doing?
So Ram, to answer this question, none of the work we did, we just imagined from the top of our head. Demands came in through our members. This is not happening. Like the copyright law, a student came in with a problem. In terms of banking, one of our students who had graduated came in with a problem saying that I'm not being allowed a bank account. Or somebody said, I want to become a physiotherapist. So how do I do that? Each one of these were need driven. And one has to be perceptive to that need and turn the challenge into an opportunity. And that's the philosophy with which we have worked. And I would say any organization, if you want to get into advocacy work, be sensitive to what is on the grassroots, feel the pulse of what people are saying. And immediately, if you think it's doable, get into it. But don't take up something and then leave it halfway, because that's more problematic. Once you take it up, you are in it for the long haul.
Good advice, good inputs. So you listen to your customers and stakeholders, who in this case are the visually impaired, and see what
precisely.
They need, and then work on it. Okay,
I have a question from Sonal Patel.
Yeah, Sonal, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay, this is Sonal, Krishna and Sam. You your talk was heart-opening, and this is actually aligns with our current motto of Visionary, Enable, Educate, and Empower. And it gave fertilizer to each one of these three hands. I don't want to elaborate on that, but I have been very, very touched by so many things that I learned. And I feel that Visionaid and you know, are a very good in alignment and you can help us too. I have few questions for you. First is, I learned that you have written a book, I for Inclusion, and will you let us know where to find that, the e-copy? That is
That's
one
on our
question.
website. It's on our website.
Okay, XRCVC website.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do. Now, one other thing you mentioned in your talk that you worked with those folks from Bookshare. And now
Right.
Bookshare is pretty accessible and open globally, that you also included the global audience and global access. So I recently learned from one of our students who is studying in Bangalore. He wrote to me that some books he wanted were not available in India on Bookshare. So if I could connect him with someone in USA on Bookshare who could help him, and that we did. So I just wanted to mention that Indian Bookshare access is still limited. They don't have
No.
global.
So I'll
books.
clarify that legal point of view. It is even today you have more than 100,000 books on Bookshare available to Indian users. Some books which are on the US Bookshare list are geographically limited by the publisher of that title in the US not having given global access. So much as Bookshare wants to open up, they in fact have an active team trying to promote global access. Some of the publishers are extremely rigid about saying, I will only give access within the US. In some cases, what has happened is books on the US list have been made through scanning, and they were made some time ago, keeping in mind the US law. Now that the US has signed up the Marrakesh Treaty and ratified the Marrakesh Treaty, over time these books will become available.
Very, very good. Thank you very much. So on the same line, on education, now a new moment that at Visionate, we want to start where Visionate students, like need-based, like lot of students from Visionate are taking now online classes on various massive open online courses. And we want to educate and raise awareness everywhere among educators, job providers, and everywhere, that blind learners matter. We don't want to use law, but we want to use love. So I want one of your advice to us to how to move forward based on the fact that I truly believe that love is the force to social justice. And how do we propel this moment and stay at it? This is has born through the needs of our students and our awareness that this is very, very important that our students get independent and have access to online education equally as any other sighted person will have. So how do we propel and go forward raising this awareness where we don't scare anybody about suing and all that thing, but just
So
Sonal,
in the interest of time, I'll summarize the key points. We ourselves have steered away from litigation as much as possible. We believe that taking people in confidence, taking them on board is the key. And you hit the nail on the head when you say love is the key, frankly. Very, very important is staying power. It's not every day that you're going to hit success, but persistence, and that's what Krishna also mentioned earlier. Test the power and persistence. Persistence will pay. So to summarize that, I'm sure the moment you all decide that you want to do something, propagate the idea and stick by it, right? So any other questions from somebody else?
Yes, actually, we have 2 more questions, a little bit over time. So if anyone
Yeah,
wants...
that's why. Sorry to cut short, but...
No. If anyone wants to drop, they can drop, but we'll take 2 more questions. One is Mr. VL Narasimhan, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Sam and Mr. Krishna. It was a very interesting talk from both of you. Thank you so much again. I am Narasimhan from VisionAid, India. During my induction to VisionAid, our president, Mr. M.S. Raju, advice to me was on the advocacy subject that the special education in all degree colleges in India should be made a compulsory stream of education. So he wanted me to keep that as a key agenda for my work and also do the needful follow-up with the Ministry of HRD and also Ministry of Education.
Can you just clarify your point in terms of special education being made compulsory in all colleges?
Yeah, special education for disabled persons, including vision impaired.
No. So when you say made compulsory, meaning what?
So
Can I explain?
Yeah,
Can I explain this?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
I'm MS Raju here. I will explain to you. See here, there are 5 lakhs of people who are going through BED and DED qualification examination in India. Do you know how many people are given what is called special education, whereby they'll be told how to teach a blind person? 500.
Yeah, Acha. So you're talking about B.Ed colleges.
B.Ed colleges and D.Ed colleges. So
right. They have now in many colleges, they have now made the B.Ed program a 2-year program. And in the 2nd year, there is a component of special education. Very honestly, the quality of that is very poor. In fact, the I for inclusion that Mr. Raju mentioned, that actually is a program we run for training teacher trainees who are part of mainstream education into how they can also build in special educator skills into their teaching repertoire. So yes, it's very important, and one has to actually push this whole thing, because the 2nd year in the B.Ed program does have a special education component.
What we noticed, if I may just add, is that there are more and more parents who are keen to get their students admitted to inclusive schools, not necessarily schools for the blind, but the teachers in these schools, the principals and the management of the schools welcome these students, but the teachers struggle because they don't have the adequate skills. They've not picked up the adequate skills, which is why, as Sam mentioned, with I for Inclusion, we work very closely with teachers of these B.Ed and D.Ed schools, and we've begun to do that. Yes, it's a process that has begun, and hopefully it will yield results at some point.
In fact, we have structured courses for them called ACA, Administrators Course for Computer Applications. And we deliver this free of charge to any BED college. But unfortunately, their attitude is, it is a nuisance, the management's attitude. The students love it. In fact, they like the very great experience they get of being blindfolded and being able to operate computers. But the managements are extremely cold over it.
Right, Mr. Raju.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
In the interest of time, any other questions?
Yes, one last question. I see Krishna is our trainer from Delhi and Agra, so he actually helps us train students. So Krishna, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ram sir, for giving me this opportunity to ask a question. Mr. Sam and Mr. Krishna, you have done a wonderful job. So I really wish that your work inspires a lot of others. So my question is that, see, I have low vision, and throughout my life, I have experienced such questions like in India, I don't see that people are too much aware about people with low vision. They know about the blindness, but they do not know that there is such community called low vision. So see, I was often asked a question like I had difficulty in seeing the objects and reading in schools. People often ask me, see, what is the use of you wearing glasses if you can't see? Why do you wear the glasses? Are you blind? Sometimes I was even asked this question. So, what do you think, like, we can spread this awareness? Because I think that people need to know that there are such people. If they do not need your sympathy, at least you should not, use the words that can sound offensive. So, what do you think, like, something can be done at the
Yeah, so Krishna,
society
very,
level?
very valid point. The low vision population is oftentimes a hidden population, and most people are not conscious of it, including the low vision themselves. Very honestly, a lot of our low vision people have realized that they have a condition like that, and they've always struggled, but they've never realized that there's a label for it. And it's very important to realize that there is a population which has this condition, and that there are special provisions available through technology and other means to give higher functionality to a low vision person. In terms of the general population, we also need to understand that they have various thought processes which, in terms of language, one of the first things I would tell people who are working in the blindness field, don't be ultra sensitive about language. When we do our awareness programs, one of the first things we tell them is, for the 2 hours you are with us, you may throw away political correctness, say what you want. And when we are working in the field, if we want people to actually become sensitive, the first thing we need to do is be open to people using words which we may not be comfortable with. What matters more important is the motivation that drives those words rather than the language. And yes, when you are doing your awareness work, focus also on the low vision population. Otherwise, a lot of focus goes only towards total blindness. And there's a whole chunk of people who are missed out as a consequence. And therefore, when we do our awareness programs, we highlight the spectrum of total blindness into low vision. Right? So this is what you could do also in your awareness programs.
Excellent. Excellent question. Excellent answer. And we are now approaching about 30 minutes over the hour. So just want to, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I don't see any more raised hands. So I just want to take this opportunity to, on behalf of VisionAid, the audience, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Krishna, for the wonderful talk. Thank you to our audience as well for attending so many of our talks and asking great questions, participating in the discussion. This has been a wonderful webinar series. We are wrapping up the series. This is Independence Day here in the US. Happy 4th of July to everyone here in Boston. And good evening, good night to those in India. And we will resume this webinar series once again in the fall and winter timeframe. So please stay tuned. But otherwise, stay healthy and stay safe. We live in challenging times. And once again, Sam and Krishna, thank you very much for your awesome talk. I will ask our moderator if he wants to add anything, and then we can close. Mr. M.S. Raju, any final words?
Yeah, a little. And I've learned a lot more things today. For example, informal is better than the formal in this effort. For example, even in COVID, when we go for a social distancing, I set an example to others and I push them out of my reach. So that's how it has to be spread. No amount of formal distancing will help. Next one is, you said persistence is important. It's extremely important in our trade, because we are not selling something which is immediately edible. Next one is, you said that we have to show our successes, show and continuously advertise our successes, so that others will be. And one more thing which I learned is in the advocacy, it is collective. It is not a individual effort. So you have to make everybody. In fact, if you go to an office and try to do some advocacy, come out and talk to the PA also, and come out and talk to other juniors and tell them about it. Collect more crowd. The last one is most important thing I feel is most people who are low vision and blind are being trained in education, but we are finding it difficult to get jobs because the jobs which are given are such nature that only in government sector they get a good salary and they keep quiet on that. So my thing is we should work on creating jobs for them. There are no jobs which can be done by blind and low vision people. That's what they say. In fact, people tell me, look here, I'm ready to employ a person, but what can you do? So this is a very sad situation we have to create. In fact, I've written a monograph on this, on training of people for job hunting, as well as creating jobs for people. So we should promote this also. Creating a job is ultimate goal of our enablement. Thank you very much.
And Sam and Krishna, over to you for the final words.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure, Vision 8. Thank you very much. All success and stay safe, stay healthy.
Because we've had a very, very rainy day in Bombay. We're not complaining because we've been waiting for over a month for these rains, but unfortunately that led to a few interruptions. Thank you for
problem. Yeah, it was still, yeah, despite the interruptions, it was a wonderful talk. Thank you again for taking time.
8 o'clock p.m.
And